Thank you. If anything goes wrong, I'm sure you'll cover for me. So.
Absolutely. So hi, everyone. Ivana Taylor here, your host for BizapaloozaChat. And I want to be sure to thank our sponsors. Our BizapaloozaChat today is sponsored by our friends at the Canon Maxify line of printers. So wonderful, wonderful product. Definitely check it out. I've got some links up there for you to see. Now, today's show is all about coaching. Is it worth the money? How do you find, hire, and succeed with the right coach? Let me tell you, and I know you guys know, coaching is a multi-million-dollar industry, and there are folks who swear their business by the coaches that they have. And then there are folks who invested tens of thousands of dollars and putting themselves into debt and financial risk and have gotten maybe not such great results. I wanted to learn more, and for that, I went to my friend Noleen Mariappen. Did I say that correctly, Noleen?
Yes, perfectly.
Wonderful. I have a strange name, so I'm all about it, right? So before I go on, I want to make sure to tell you guys that you can follow the chat on Twitter. Simply go to Twitter. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a search bar. Just type in hashtag BizapaloozaChat. I'm going to type in a tweet right now with your name, Noleen.
Yep, I'm on the page.
You're on the page. Join us, folks. Hashtag. So Noleen, welcome. It is so great to have you.
It's such a pleasure to be here.
That's awesome. So tell me, Noleen, you are very, very broad. I mean, are you a coach? What's your background in coaching? But you've written so many different books on a variety of different topics around entrepreneurship. So introduce yourself a bit.
Okay, sure. So, well, my name's Noleen Mariappen. My background started in project development. And for a long time, I worked on projects that focused on social and economic regeneration. And as part of that, what we found ourselves doing was working with a number of businesses in order to allow for them to develop and expand. And at the same time, we were working with people in the local community to help them upskill so that they could actually be employed by those businesses when they did expand and they had the right sort of skill set. While that was happening, I was also setting up businesses in my part-time, my spare time, because I have a passion for people and I have a passion for businesses. And I love seeing things develop and expand and grow. I absolutely love that. So the long and short of it was I was working full time on these projects and I was setting up businesses in my spare time. They were doing really well. Most of them were online businesses because that required the least amount of time and it didn't require me to actually be there. So I started doing that. They were doing well. One of them expanded to the point where we opened up a call center, which was being managed by someone else. And I made the decision to actually acquire another business. And that was going to be, everything was going to be sorted after that. But as life goes, it didn't quite work out that way. I was doing business in another country, hired people in another country, got ripped off really badly and went from one day thinking everything's going to be fantastic to a few days later being absolutely broke. I mean, I lost absolutely everything. And at that stage, the project that I was working on full time was also coming to an end. So I was facing redundancy and had lost everything. So decided that I was going to focus just on business. Working on developing a portfolio of businesses. I now part own 3 and own a 4th. And really the consulting comes from my organizational psychology background. I focus quite a lot on organizational development and from experience, from having been there and seen the hurdles and actually made all of those mistakes, and seeing what it actually takes, having worked with people over the last few years to actually get from point A to point B. So it's the business consulting. I'm a bit of a serial entrepreneur. I do some speaking engagements. I write because I love to write. And I support people where I can with coaching and with mentoring. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
So this is one of the reasons that I asked you on here, because I didn't want to speak with someone who, you know, was sort of the full out pushing business coaching. I really wanted to speak to someone who had a lot of broad experience. So Noleen, I'm going to throw out that first question onto Twitter right now, which is, what is a business coach?
Okay, so a business coach is really someone who helps you to clarify your vision, because often we have an idea of what we want to accomplish, you know, at the end, but we've got no clarity as to is it feasible? How do we get there? Do we have the resources? If we don't, what is it that we actually need? And we aren't really aware of the pitfalls. So a business coach helps to clarify that vision, helps to clear up what the goals really are, and helps to get you from where you are to where you want to be with your business. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
So have you used a business coach in your experience, you know, in the experiences that you've had?
I've tried different business coaches. I have had a business coach, but for me, what has worked best has actually been mentorship. You know, but it really is different for everyone. So some people require in specific ways, and some people don't, and some coaches work for some people and some don't. So in terms of the coaching experience, I've had a coach, I've tried a few coaches, and what's worked best for me has been the mentorship.
So then what's the difference between a mentor and a coach?
Okay, so a mentor is what I found, and this might just be indicative of the industry at the moment, there seems to have been a shift away from coaches being really invested in businesses and really wanting you to succeed and spending a lot of time directing you to it's almost become like a commercial model of coaching, where it's try to get as many students as possible, you know, try to apply the same thing to many people. And I'm not saying that it's the same for everyone. It really isn't. And there's some absolutely phenomenal coaches out there. But in terms of, you know, one of the key differences between coaching and mentoring, coaches will help give you direct advice, help to, you know, steer you in specific directions and let you know where they see the shortfalls as being, but they'll also direct you on specific strategies. They'll help you with operational models and that sort of thing. Whereas with mentors work more in terms of guidance and helping you to develop to the point and assess your situation and reassess the business. So they're not as directive in the way that coaches are. And mentoring is broader than coaching as well. So a relationship with a mentor much closer. A mentor will be with you, you know, throughout life, not necessarily just on a specific business or just in relation to that.
So a mentor sort of guides you, and then a coach gives you more direction. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay, so I got to ask, let's you know, drive that conversation a little bit further. We talked about the difference between coaching and mentoring, and then you also mentioned the coaching as an industry. Now, we've all seen it, right? Like whether it's people hanging out a shingle, whether it's all this other kind of stuff. And I think one of the things that really disturbed me, I'm going to say, it seems like people have an addiction. Have you seen that? Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, yeah, sure. I think, in terms of this addiction to coaching, I think what happens is it's more so that people become addicted to the feeling generated by the hype and the networks and going to events and meeting different people, because there is a lot of energy
Ah.
at those events. And I think that's what so people become addicted to that and will keep going to events. Um, but it is actually possible. I don't know whether you'd call it an addiction or not, but if your coach isn't right for you, you can develop a dependency on your coach. If you're at a point where you need to turn to your coach after X period of time to help you make a decision on absolutely everything, then it isn't right, because you're supposed to be developing yourself and your business to the point where you can actually move forward. You shouldn't need to have a coach all the time. And one of the other things as well is that it's not always the case that one coach is right for you throughout the life cycle of your business. So sometimes you get to a point where a coach is absolutely fantastic to a specific point, but thereafter you actually need to be looking for someone else. So if you've developed a dependence on a specific coach, something is not working right, because it should never be that way. At the beginning, yes, kind of getting feedback and guidance and support, that's one thing, but dependence is something else. And in terms of that addiction, I know that there are a number of, do actually become addicted to the hype and the energy of the networks and the events, and sort of buy into that more than the value of what it is that they're getting. A lot do offer fantastic value, but at the same time, it's different for everyone.
So that brings me to the next question I have. What are the questions you should ask a coach when you're evaluating? Well, there's a whole other question I have. So let's go to the questions. I don't even know what to ask. I want to ask about the questions, but I also want to ask about, how do you know that you need a coach?
Okay.
What should be your trigger?
Right. So which one do you want to start with?
I guess I should start with the one that's, how do you know that you need one, right? Because then that might drive the questions that you ask.
Okay. So it's sort of the reason that you'd look to hire someone. If you're in a business and you feel like you're at a standstill, and you've spoken to everyone who you work with, and some of your friends and trusted advisors, friends and family, whoever they might be, but you feel you're at a standstill, or you feel like there is more that you could achieve and you just don't know how, then I think those would be instances where you would look at hiring a business development consultant or a business coach, and they can help you to ascertain what exactly it is why it is that you're stuck, whether that is the end, whether that's you've come to the end of the life cycle of the business and you need to look at other things, or whether there is actually somewhere to go. And more often than not, there are additional profit streams that people could be looking at, and different directions that they could take the business in. Sometimes it's a matter of just repackaging what you have. So there are a number of different things, but that would be the trigger. If you feel like you're in limbo, and you don't know where it's going anymore, or it's just not going anywhere. It could even be doing fantastically well, but you feel like it could do better, then I'd say those are the times that you could think about getting a coach.
That's awesome. So I want to bring up a comment, because David 3.0.1, I love that. It's JSP.
Hi, David.
Hi, David. He's out in your neck of the woods, I think. He says, he asked the question, wasn't it a good thing to be dependent on a coach? I hope I got your question right, David. Is this a good thing, the sense of dependence on your coach, right? And I answered, I thought you said not so much, right? If you if you have to count on your coach to answer everything.
Exactly. So I'm not saying that you need to be, you need to assess the advice that you're getting from your coach. And absolutely at the beginning, you need to be, looking at that advice, following it. Because if you've hired a coach, you trust that person and you trust them to actually take your business in the right direction. So you need to be following the advice and trusting that they're helping you move in the right direction and do the right thing. But if after, a certain period of time, you're still turning to your coach for every decision that you need to make in your business, then it's time to reassess that relationship, because that's a level of dependence which, as is in most cases, is unhealthy. Because the aim should be for you to be learning what it is that you need to learn from your coach. So learning from their mistakes, learning from the lessons that you have, learning from the strategies that you implement, to be able to start making some of the decisions on your own, to be able to start moving things in a specific direction, and to move on to the stage where you think, okay, this is fantastic. I'm moving, it's a fantastic trajectory. I'm moving in a different direction, so I'm not stalling and I'm moving upward. And different sort of advice, then that's one thing. But if it's a dependence, it's completely different.
I get it. I really get that. So now to the questions, right? So what should you be checking on? I've got Husametin, who says you got to check on their vision and their acknowledgement, so it's a good mesh overall. That's what he's saying that you should be checking in on. What are some questions you should be asking to find out if a coach is a good fit for you?
Okay, so there are quite a few things. I think, before hiring a coach, don't be afraid to ask the questions, because as I said before, a coach that works well for one person and one business might not necessarily work well for someone else. And that isn't always because of the skill level or the knowledge base of the coach. That sometimes has, could have something to do with the business, could have something to do with the business owner. So some of the questions, it's important, the experience of the person that you're going to be working with. I think it's important to ask about measurable success, because it's not important, well, it is important as to how you make people feel when working in specific businesses, but it's also important to look at measurable success. I also think it's important to look at failures, to have that discussion as to where they might have failed and what they would do differently, because that's where a lot of insights come from. It comes from people's failures. It comes from overcoming those obstacles and, the difficult things that they've had to endure, because really you want a coach so that you don't have to make those same mistakes. And if your coach doesn't know what the mistakes are going to be, then, they're not going to help you short circuit it. So, measurable success, failures, have to know everything about your business and doesn't have to be from the same industry. I really believe this. But what I do believe is that they have to have transferability of knowledge. So their knowledge and skills need to be transferable, and completely fine to ask about that. I also think it's really important to ask about their approach and their support strategy. Because sometimes things don't work because approach to work is completely different. And you need to have the right fit for you and the right fit for your business and the right fit for the culture of your business. If you're happy with that culture, then you'll want a coach that has a different approach and who can apply a different culture of work. So those are, are the sort of things. It's good to ask about expertise, and it's good to ask about how any skills gaps or gaps in expertise will be filled, because none of us know everything there is to know about everything. But it's important to know that if there are specific aspects that we're not particularly good at, that I think it's completely fine for a coach not to be a superhero and a know-it-all. That's completely fine, as long as they have access to the knowledge or to, a team of people should you need it. If your coach, I'd say if your coach professes to know everything, then that should raise us for you. And a very important thing is belief in your vision as well. I think it's really important for your coach to believe in your vision, and very important suggested timeline because you should have specific goals. And so I think that's
and you are my straight woman on that question, the pricing, right? So I'm on to question 3, all you Twitter people. Question 3 is, and you're going to see it here in just a minute. Of course, my system is slow, but let's talk about, you know, this idea of investment. And is there a rule of thumb around how much to invest? Because that's one of the biggest concerns I have. I see a lot of people, back to your point, right? I don't see, how do I say this? I see people looking at their business and maybe they notice that they're stuck. They get that, right? But what I think they skip over is evaluating coaches on how they can help them. What I see happening instead is they get really hung up on marketing messages and all these amazing promises. And, you know, and that's why I really appreciate you are going over some of these details about how to choose a coach. The next question I have then is there a rule of thumb around pricing?
Okay, there really, really isn't a rule of thumb, because coaches, like, you know, any professionals, depending on the level that they're working at, the prices will range. And depending on where you're at with your company, you'll require different things and you'll require different skill sets. So for example, when you're starting out, yes, you need to be looking, or actually it might not necessarily be when you're starting out, you could have been going for years, but you don't have your branding and your message, or if it's important in your business that is clarified, you might not have that. Then you might have you might need a coach who focuses very heavily on that, because that's what's going to get you to from point A to point B. But, you know, in terms of how much you invest, it is different, but what you need to focus on is the return on investment. So key is that return on investment. And initially you won't be able to see it in financial terms. But what I always recommend is not to pay tons of money upfront, because you don't actually know how that's going to work for you for a number of reasons. It could be the skill set, it could be a mismatch in terms of culture and approach. Some coaches work fantastically for other people and wouldn't necessarily work for you. But also what's really important is to know that at times, even if you want things to change and you have a great coach, you may not be ready to actually take on board that advice. Or even if you're in the right frame of mind to take it on board, your systems in your business might not be at a time or a place where you're actually ready to implement new things. You might not have the resources to follow through with all the advice that you get. So before spending money on coaching, I think always look to get a free consultation just to see whether or not it is that you actually connect with the person that you're going to be working with. Don't always where you feel like it's someone that agrees with A and you're completely on the thing, because it's the sort of stuff that you could be doing yourself anyway if it's exactly what you're thinking and what you're doing and what you think should happen. Look for a coach that sort of challenges you a little bit, but have that free consultation, and those are the sorts of things that you should be looking for. And then I'd say pay for a few sessions and see how it goes. Initially, that return on investment isn't going to necessarily be a financial return, but you will start to see that, you know, it will start to make sense to you. You'll have those, oh, actually, yes, moments. And that's what you should be looking for at the beginning. And it should make sense. You should see that it's moving in the right direction, and you should see that it's going to take you, get you to where you want to go, and that those are the little steps that are going to get you there. So that's the biggest thing, looking at the return on investment. And if you've had that free consultation, you've paid a lot of money for, say, 2 or 3 sessions, and you're going through things and you think, okay, actually, you know, this isn't that great. You know, if I just looked for someone online and hired a marketing person, I could have gotten the same sort of thing. Then you need to be reassessing. If you find that, okay, this is going slower than I thought, but actually this person is really supporting me in terms of clearing up my vision and helping me to, to take those little steps, or even just to plan those little steps and look at how I could be implementing it, then I'd say still reassess. But that's more likely than if you're thinking, oh, okay, well, actually, I'm not so sure. But at least then you know that you haven't forked out a large sum of money for 6 months or a year of coaching.
And, David makes a wonderful point. Mm-hmm. He says, be clear about what you want to achieve, and it must be measurable, because if it's not achieved, you can invoke a money-back guarantee. And that makes me think, Noleen, mm-hmm. I noticed that a lot of, I don't want to be like broad brush, right? But maybe there are some folks who go into a coaching relationship feeling slightly less than, and then maybe not good enough or whatever. And then they don't think about invoking a money back guarantee. What do you think about that?
I think a lot of people don't know that they can. And one of the difficulties is that often when you start a coaching relationship, or you've actually started working with a coach, you're not clear on that vision. So when you're getting clear on it, you've already paid them and signed, and you're sort of working through it. So initially it's quite difficult, but I agree with David completely. And I think the stage at which you should be doing that is at that free consultation. So you go through, well, okay, this is where I'm at. This is where I want to get to. How can you help me? What are the steps involved? And like I said, working to that timeline and asking them about the timeline. That's really important, because that's just another thing that you can add to if you're invoking that money back guarantee. So you can say, well, actually, what am I going to be able to accomplish in X amount of time, Y amount of time? And it makes it a little bit easier. But I think a lot of people just don't know that they can. And the terms of coaching are very, very vague. A lot of people don't put it down to measurables. And really, especially if you're working longer term, you should, because you should be able to see the return on investment. Unless, of course, your coach is only there to support you with, mindsets and the psychology of business or the psychology of selling. So where it's something where you can't actually look at tangibles.
I hear you. And so David brings up another interesting point. He says, I believe free consultations are a waste of time on both sides. And that makes me think that maybe it's not a free consultation, at least the way I hear you say it. It sounds more like an interview, like where this is your opportunity to ask important questions.
Exactly. On that point, I agree with you. It is more of an interview, and it's actually assessing whether or not you're right for the person and the person is right for you. But without that, I find it very difficult, because not all coaches have even a consultation or an initial interview, if you were, at a reasonable cost. So if you had to go through quite a few people that you're interviewing, you could end up spending quite a lot of money. So I think, coaches should really be willing to have those initial conversations, even if it's not, counted, or if we're not referring to it as a consultation, even if it's just a conversation. I wouldn't see it as a waste of time, because if you're a coach, it's a potential client, and if you're a client, you're determining whether the coach is right for you.
And one of the other things that's happening is that they may also be using these quote unquote free consultations or breakthrough sessions as a selling feature way more than an opportunity to allow the coach and the person to get to know each other better.
Pardon? Sorry?
Sorry. I was saying that perhaps coaches often use these free consultations or sessions as
Yes.
breakthrough sessions. And that's more of a marketing tool than the opportunity to get to know the person that you're working with.
Yes. So it is about it being, the reasons for it being fair and genuine. So if it is just a marketing tool in order to kind of get in as many people as possible and to sell as much as possible, it's not quite the same. And I think if you get the sense that that is what it is and you're not comfortable with that, then that person isn't right for you.
Excellent point. Okay, so let's talk about, I've already put the question out there, question 4, which is what's the difference between a life coach and a business coach, right? Because so many people get involved in the mindset piece and so many business owners, our personal and professional lives are completely combined.
Yes, yeah. So a life coach focuses on more of your personal goals. And this
Mm-hmm.
can be quite wide ranging. So, it could even be around weight loss. And for me, a life coach doesn't work in isolation. So depending on what area of your life it is that you want for them to support with, they also work with other people, which is the same point that I'd raised about a business coach before. How does a business coach fill in the gaps in terms of their expertise and skill set? It's exactly the same with a life coach. So a life coach focuses on more of your personal goals, and a business coach focuses on your professional and business goals. Often, at times, like you say, they're quite intertwined, but a life coach would be helping you to try to find balance.
Right.
So that you are focusing on more of the personal stuff, because it's, the whole concept of, you don't live to work, you work to live.
Mm.
um and for a business coach, it is specifically focusing on getting you professionally and your business to a specific point.
Got it. Well, you have just answered a couple of my original questions, so I'm swiping them out,
Okay.
Noleen. So now I want to ask you a question. I'm going to throw it out to the group as well. What are
Yeah.
some common excuses for not hiring a coach?
Um, okay, so some of the reasons or excuses, however it is that you'd like to phrase it. Um, so people sometimes feel like they know it all. So they already know what it is that needs to happen in their business. And they already know what the steps are to take. They just feel like it might be taking them a longer time to get there. Sometimes it's not necessarily an excuse. Sometimes people feel like they really just don't have the resources, and sometimes the resources are financial resources to be able to pay for a coach, because their business is stuck or struggling and they need to spend the money in the business rather than on a coach. And sometimes people feel like having a coach is going to demand even more of their time when they don't actually have the time to give.
That is a great point. I know that I was, part of, I guess, a marketing campaign,
Mm-hmm.
meaning like I received a marketing campaign from someone. And what they were talking about was they were selling all the features of this amazing coaching program.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like, we have this and we have this, and there's a weekly hangout and there's this and there's this. And I looked at that, it was like $35,000. And I was like, I don't think I would have enough hours in the day
Mm-hmm.
to scratch the surface of what these folks were offering.
Yeah.
I mean, it just seemed like a lot of content. That to your point, I just didn't think I was going to get through it.
Yeah. And that's just it. Sometimes it's not about the value that the coach can offer. Sometimes it's about you being in the right space to be able to make the most of that value, and really see it reap rewards for you. But those are some of the reasons. And the one thing I'd say is, to be very aware, because I'd mentioned the whole thing about sometimes people feel that they know it all and it's a reason that they don't hire coaches. But then at the same time, those sorts of characters if they do hire a coach that is very closely aligned with the way they think and what they think should happen. And I'd spoken about this earlier on. If it's exactly what you feel should happen, and it's not challenging you in any way, and you're not actually doing anything differently to what you would do on your own, then you need to reassess.
So let's talk a little bit about transparency.
Mm-hmm.
What role does transparency play in coaching?
I think it's absolutely essential. I think it's important on both sides. I think as a business owner and entrepreneur, or even if you're just considering it and you get a business coach, you need to be completely upfront and honest about where you're at, what the difficulties are in your business. Often people don't want to give that away. When you're working with the coach, they need to see it warts and all, because they can't see the bigger picture. They can't see the picture as it is and help you get to where you need to get to unless they know what some of those issues are. So completely, essential on that side of things. On the other side, it's also really important for coaches to be very upfront and honest about themselves and where their skill sets lie, where their expertise is, and be completely honest about how it is that they're going to fill those gaps. I don't think you should see your coach as being any less of a coach if they rely on other experts for advice and support. Actually, I think that's fantastic. And also, it's important for coaches to be very upfront and honest about the amount of time that they can allocate to you and your business. So, so that you don't have, so that expectations are matched, basically.
Got it. Yeah, I think transparency is really important in so many ways. And I guess I want to stray to this idea of maybe these, I don't want to talk about anyone in particular. That's not my intent, but I want to talk about these like super duper coaches, right? And the people I'm talking about, the tier 1 folks, maybe even I'm sure that even Tony Robbins started out at that level, right? At some point where he started coaching people, but the people I'm talking about, right? They've really built up a coaching enterprise.
Yes.
Right. So the part that's I guess disconcerting to me is people sort of looking to these tier 1 coaches as, they know all things, they can solve all things. And one of the things, I don't know if you and I talked about this when we chatted, but I noticed that as I've gone to see a bunch of these folks speak and been to their programs and everything, and I have to admit, originally I went to sort of, how do I say this? Catch them being schlocky.
Okay.
Right? This was my intent.
Okay.
But let me tell you that when I saw the materials and I saw the content and I met the people, these people had good content. I didn't see anything schlocky about what they had. I think the issues first of all, they were being very authentic and open and transparent about, this was the situation I was in. This is what happened to me. This is how I fixed the problem. I'm going to share the system that I use to fix my problem. If you have this problem too, this might work for you. Basically, right?
Right, yeah.
But I think I see a lot of folks maybe attributing like too much, what would you call that, Noleen? Like too much, not credibility. What is that? Like just that they weren't, you know what I mean? Like they were a god or something. Faith, right? Faith in the promise of something, right?
Yes. That
may or may not be there, right? And so that was the kind of concern I had around transparency.
Yeah. I think, a lot of the people who do, like I say, fantastic coaches, have been through lots, built empires, have businesses that work wonderfully and that sort of thing. But it goes back again to not every coach is right for every person. And it's not always the right time. And often the people who have the most amount of faith are the ones who are in the most desperate of situations, if you were, with their businesses, and
Yes.
are really desperate for something to work out. And so they really want to hang on to that. And that's not necessarily about the coaches, because they're saying the same thing to everyone. We just hear it differently and believe in it differently and ascribe to it differently based on our own situations, which is why I said it's so important to assess where you are and to figure out whether it's the right time and whether it's the right thing, and whether you're actually able to, not just to commit to it. It's a commitment in terms of time. It's a commitment in terms of finances. It's an emotional commitment, and it's, you need to know that you're going to have to work. It's not going to be someone comes along and waves a wand and is going to give you all the answers and it's just going to fix everything, because sometimes that's how it comes across, or that's the way people can view it. It's like, okay, they solved all their problems, so I can solve all of mine if I just apply this. And it doesn't work that way. You're going to have to work hard at times, and sometimes, the hard work might not pay off immediately, but at the same time, the same hard work won't pay off for everyone. And that's just how it is. So I think, as audiences, if you were, as consumers, we just need to be aware of those things. We need to be coming to be a little bit more self-aware of these situations, and start to look at it, and try to take a step back a little bit, irrespective of what the situation is, just to think, okay, well, what is the best way for me to actually figure out whether this is right for me and is right for me right now?
No, I hear you completely. So, and not only that, you've got me thinking, and David, and there's a whole conversation going on over here on Twitter where Dr. Sabrina and David are talking about this idea of, not being afraid to ask the right questions. And that makes me think that before, like, once you feel like I'm stuck in my business, once you feel like I think I maybe need to improve on a specific skill set. I mean, I actually, for some reason, when I hire a coach, and I don't do it often, but I did it a while ago, long time ago, because I wanted to learn all about how virtual summits go, telesummits, and that kind of thing. I wanted to learn the process.
Mm-hmm.
What are the critical success factors? How do you make it work? What are things you have to have in place? Those kinds of things, right? I also wanted to be introduced to people in that space.
Yes.
Right. So to me, I had some very, very specific goals
Mm-hmm.
in mind, and I found someone who could help me implement it. And to me, I felt that was, it wasn't cheap, but I felt like I learned a lot very quickly.
Yes, and you got the value that you wanted out of it.
I did. And so that makes me think, with what you're talking about and what the folks are talking about on Twitter, that you really have to prepare yourself for hiring a coach.
Absolutely. It's not always complete. If you were completely clear as to how you would get from point A to point B, you wouldn't need the coach. But you do really need to know where it is that you want to get to, and you need to be able to ask all of those questions. They aren't always easy to ask, because sometimes in these situations it can be quite intimidating, and and people feel like these coaches know so much and have gotten so far in life, have built these empires, and who am I to question what it is that they can do for me?
Correct.
But your situation is always unique to you. There will be a lot of similarities in terms of the types of challenges you might face and that sort of thing, but it's completely okay to ask those questions. And I think great coaches are not afraid of answering them.
I think that is a great point, right? That is the perfect point, because there's nothing wrong with asking the question. There's nothing wrong with putting them, I think what I'm learning from our conversation is maybe the first lesson of coaching is to sort of be a stand for yourself and what outcome you have, right?
Yeah,
so
totally.
one of the things I asked on question 7 was, what is it that you want more time for? What is one area of life you'd like to improve? So I'm going to ask you that question.
My fitness levels.
Your fitness level. I hear that.
I'd love actually to get over this allergic reaction I have to the gym.
I hear that.
Yeah, so I did actually make a conscious decision that was going to change. and
Are you going to get yourself a coach for that?
I see, this is the thing. I'm going to start on my own, and when I'm at a certain level where I know that I'm going to be able to, go every day or every other day or however often it is that I get around to going, because I in exactly the same way as with any other sort of coaching, I don't really want to invest in it until I know that I'm actually ready to be able to listen and go through the grueling trial that is, what is to come with a fitness coach.
Well, exactly. And for example, that's on my list too. In fact, I have a terrible confession to make.
Go on.
I bought, so what was happening is I was going month to month, right? And then for the summer, my son was going to be off school, and I'm like, oh, we're going to go to the rec center. We're going to go together. It's going to be great. I buy a bundle for the summer. And no sooner do I buy a bundle for the summer than I have a couple clients or whatever that dropped in right in that time space.
Yes.
And then, and then I thought I've gone round and around. I've thought to myself that maybe I should hire a trainer, right? But that's not a coach.
Yes.
Right? A trainer is a trainer.
No, yeah, exactly.
Right. So I've thought about it. I've done not a doggone thing.
Well, it's never too late to change that and to start. So
but I love you. I love your advice. So we've got a couple things. I'm also right on track with Dr. Sabrina, who said she wanted more time for thinking. Oh my word, do I hear that? Absolutely. Definitely. I don't think, and maybe this is why coaching is so appealing, because it allows you to schedule that time to work on your business.
Yeah. I think a lot of us work in the business rather than on the business. And it is, it's a bit of a double-edged sword with coaching, because yes, it's going to give you the time out to actually be able to think about it, but at the same time it's also going to give you a lot more stuff to do if you're doing it right initially, so that it will actually take up some of your time. So some of the free time that you have initially, you are going to have, you're going to have to be following the advice and actually doing what you need to be doing. So short term, it takes up more time, but the aim is that long term, it's going to buy you time.
And that's right into the last question I have for you. And then I'm going to let you go and jump onto Twitter and really chat with folks, so that you're not so distracted. Me too, right? Because we've got questions and stuff going on. But one of the things that I think is really interesting is I just did a webinar recently, and one of the questions that we asked was, what would you do if you had more hours in the day?
Okay.
If you had an additional 5 hours in the week, for example, or an additional hour in the day, what would you do with it?
For me, it would be a few different things. I'd spend more time with friends because I find that I don't do that often enough. I'd read more. There is just so much out there, and I'm constantly, picking up little snippets of things and thinking, oh, I'd love to read more about that. and it doesn't happen. And also expanding a couple of the nonprofits that I'm working on. So those would be 3 things that I'd work on if I had those extra 5 hours a week.
Oh, I love that. I can't wait to see what everybody else says. Mine is going to be very, very brutally honest.
Yeah, go on.
I am putting it up there on Twitter right now. If I had an extra more hours in the day, I would be lazy and do nothing.
That's a good one.
Do you think that's a good one? And this is
one. I go through periods of doing nothing, but I don't consider it doing nothing, because even if I'm just sitting around, I'm thinking, you know, or I feel it's actually quite important to have that time out. So absolutely, 100%. What I wish I could do more of is sleep.
That is so important.
I know, but I have friends who, their head hits the pillow and in a few seconds they're just
out. Know.
And they could, if they had 24 hours to sleep, they could sleep for all 24 hours. Whereas for me, if I've slept, I'll wake up and then I'm just sort of sitting there. So
I'm with you. I am with you. I have the same problem. Like I've actually, I was, like I said, I just did this productivity webinar, and we talked about the importance of sleep and how your brain needs time to recharge. Your brain needs time to like do nothing.
Exactly.
You need to reset. How do I say this? You need to reset your emotions.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you sort of start afresh the next day. And
exactly.
You can't breathe when you're,
Exactly. And I think that, and the other studies, so, there was this whole conversation about successful people get up an hour earlier. And I'm like, oh my God, really? Now I have to tell you that I have trained myself to get up an hour earlier. And then I was like, well, does it matter? Depending on your biological clock, so to speak, maybe you should stay up an hour later, right? I'm an hour earlier kind of girl. Maybe you should stay up later. But what I've learned is that the studies have shown that it's actually is the early one that's better.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that interesting? So are you a morning person or are you an evening person?
I'm a morning person. I'm definitely a morning person. In the evening, it's more sort of wind down time, and it's the activities that don't really require very much. So I can work late into the night, but I don't necessarily want to do anything that's too taxing.
That's exactly right. And that's why I love doing tweet chats at night, even though I do mine during the day, because that's what works for me. But the quiet ones I like to do at night, because you could just kind of sit back, but I'm exhausted at the end.
Yeah.
I'm tired. So what other tips and strategies do you have? Oh, I have another question. So is there a difference between face-to-face coaching, like live coaching, or one-to-one, phone, or online, or group? Talk a little bit about that.
Okay. Yes, there is a difference. I think it's very important. I mean, if you're just going for, like, in terms of a group, those have their value, but you wouldn't necessarily be working on an ongoing basis in a group. I think it's very important to be able to hear people's voices and see their body language. I think that's very important, because especially when you're speaking to people about things that are quite challenging or difficult. And some of it isn't necessarily, if you were just emailing something out, you take the time to think about how you're phrasing things, to think about how you're wording things. And sometimes people fall into this wanting to give the best possible view of things. And I think it's very important, both for the coach and for the person who's being coached, to be able to see each other and to get a sense of who the other person is. So even if you can't meet in person, I think, Skype, FaceTime, there's so many ways that you can actually engage face to face. That's pretty important. It doesn't have to happen all the time. But I think that is actually very, very important, just to maintain that connection and to get a real sense of where somebody's at, and how they're doing, because sometimes there are things that are impacting on someone that has nothing to do with the business, and you can only really pick up on it if you see them and engage with them in that way.
I think that's a great answer. And there's so many wonderful tools today that you can use for coaching. And I actually use Skype. I use Google Hangouts when it's behaving, like not today.
Quite a lot today, hasn't it?
Yeah, right. But I actually use Skype a lot, and it feels like a facilitated session. I've done a coaching session where, I'm on Skype and there's like 5 people in the room, and we're using Google Docs. So we're, working straight through all together. It's really, really wonderful. So many great tools to use. So Noleen, thank you so much for being my guest today.
No problem. If I could just say one more thing,
please,
because I think it's related to something that David had gotten up as well. It was a comment that he made about, sorry, I'm just trying to...
No, go ahead. Take your time.
Guy FaceTime. See, you can't even spell right now. Well, I think, hopefully people will get a sense of what it is I'm trying to say. So apologies there if it went all wonky. David said, I read it a little while ago. I'm trying to find where it is, but something along the lines of, it's a good coach will actually tease out the questions and sort of
yes, I know what you mean. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's absolutely right. And one of the things in terms of looking at a good or looking for a coach, and when you're looking at what a good coach will do, and what some of the traits are, I think that was one of the things. It's important for them to listen, so to actually pay attention to what it is that you're saying. If your coach is just constantly trying to bombard you with all the right ways of doing things without taking the time to listen to your situation and what's going on with your business, that's not necessarily what you want. So to actually look at the situation, because sometimes you don't necessarily see what's going on. And sometimes you're so involved in it that you might not necessarily get a fuller picture of what's going on. And this is where it comes to David's point about the questioning. So, looking, listening, looking, and questioning. And from that questioning, assessing what the situation is, and then going through the explanation phase and actually explaining where things are at, where you think it could go, and then moving on to strategy and helping you implement. And after that, it's reviewing and then repeating. So you kind of go through those stages constantly. But I think that's what, if you're going into, if you're hiring a coach, that's what you should be looking for them to be doing.
That is absolutely great advice. So Noleen, you've written a bunch of books. There's so much information. Where do we go to learn more about you and some of the stuff that you're working on? Fill us in on that.
Okay, sure. So you can go to my my personal website, which is noleenm.com. And that gives you a little bit of information about me and some of the projects that I work on and the businesses I own, some of the partnerships I have. And I'll be updating that soon with a couple of the nonprofit projects that we're working on. One of them is called Powerhouse of Women Worldwide. And Ivana, you are one of them. And the other one is Future Creators, which is looking at global change and incentivized problem solving.
That's wonderful. So make sure you guys that you check out Noleen's site, NoleenM, correct.com?
Correct, yes.
Wonderful. Check it out. There's awesome books. So I got to tell you guys, I found Noleen by picking up a book on productivity, and then she and I connected, and it was a while ago. So I'm so happy to have her back. And talking about coaching, which is something that we all need some good sound advice on, right? We are going to be off next week, but join us again August 22nd for another exciting Bizapalooza chat. I know it's summer. Everyone's vacationing. I'm vacationing too. So I will join all of you guys in a couple weeks. We'll see you back to school time. We'll be having a fun Bizapalooza chat Monday, August 22nd, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. What time is it where you are?
Now it is 8 p.m. So it started at 7.
It
Yeah.
started at 7
Yeah.
p.m. So thank you all for being here. Noleen, thank you so much for being here. It was great having you.
You're more than welcome. Thank you so much for having me. And we will definitely be chatting more.
Sounds great. Take care.
And you.